Steven Spielberg called this man the master of comic timing and said, "I learned a lot from him." Danny DeVito called him the very best at his craft. He defined what it takes to run a show and keep people laughing. He will always be in our hearts. To Tony Danza, he was simply the greatest of all time. The head of the National Comedy Center said that he elevated the sitcom as an art form and that his legacy is woven into the history of comedy itself. The man they're talking about is Jimmy Burrows. And although you may not recognize his face, if you've watched American television in the last 50 years, you've almost certainly seen his name. In a television landscape where most pilots never make it to series, Jimmy had the golden touch. Out of the approximately 90 sitcom pilots that he directed, 75 got picked up. Nominated for 79 major industry awards, winner of 11 Emmys for directing. And he may have even paved the way for gay marriage in the United States. So who was this guy? And what makes him so special? Our story starts with a hit NBC sitcom set in a bar.
Hello, Duffy's Tavern, where do you eat meat deep?
It's the early 1940s. TV sitcoms haven't been invented yet. TV had barely been invented. Back then, Americans got their entertainment on the radio. One of the most popular formats was the situation comedy. The same characters every week in different funny situations. A showplace for vaudeville and Borscht Belt comics to bring their acts to a nationwide audience. With no visuals, the ensemble of a sitcom needed to have characters with distinctive voices.
Hey, George, where'd you put that ammunition? It's in your desk.
Catchphrases.
Henry Aldrich. Oh, coming, Mother.
And there's a rhythm to the dialogue on those shows, a delivery that culminates in a laugh from a live audience in a way that would be as familiar to an audience in the 1990s as the 1940s.
Why don't you drive me down now and just sort of casually get into conversation with her?
I don't think it'll do any good.
Oh, go on. You've got a way with the ladies, Uncle.
Yeah, if I have, then she's no lady.
And back then, people needed something to laugh about. They were coming out of a depression and into a world war. It had been a rough decade. And one of the people struggling through it was a man named Abe Burrows. Abe had dropped out of school in his late teens to take a job running errands on Wall Street. Just a few weeks before the crash that started the Great Depression. Out of work, he faced a tough job hunt.
What are you qualified to do?
Nothing.
He struggled to make ends meet as a salesman. Sold blouses, wallpaper. He tried to sell maple syrup, but couldn't because he drank the samples. Then he found something that he could sell. Jokes. He started writing for radio comics, and then created a show based on guys that he knew around the neighborhood set in a local bar. That was Duffy's Tavern. It was a huge hit. 7 million people tuned in every week. Duffy's Tavern got turned into a film.
Hello, Duffy's Tavern, where do you eat meat deep?
It became one of the first TV sitcoms.
Hello, Duffy's Tavern, where do you eat meat deep?
It was still getting referenced 50 years later.
Moe's Tavern, where do you eat meat to drink?
As head writer, one of Abe's priorities was nurturing upcoming talent. He hired Nat Hiken, who'd create Car 54. Dick Martin, who'd create Laugh-In.
Sock it to me.
Larry Gelbart, who'd run the TV version of MASH.
One homosexual.
Duffy's Tavern made Abe Burrows one of the hottest writers in the country. And he followed it up with more success. He wrote and directed a string of hit shows on Broadway. He wrote the book for Guys and Dolls. He won a Pulitzer Prize for how to succeed in business without really trying. People loved his sharp wit. He was a frequent guest on panel shows. And his lavish parties were a who's who of showbiz legends. Frank Sinatra, Danny Kaye, Charlie Chaplin, Truman Capote, Edward Albee. But there was one person who didn't want to be at Abe's parties. His son, Jimmy. To Jimmy, these entertainment giants were just some old guys from Dad's work. Going to the theater was like visiting Dad at the office. All Jimmy cared about was sports. His parents must have been disappointed. Somehow, they got a jock. His mother, Ruth, might have hoped that her kid would follow her footsteps into politics.
My mom was a big leftist, and Lori and I would march in the May Day parade not having any idea what it was for, because it was a communist parade.
Ruth was a dedicated member of the Communist Party. In the early 1950s, when the Rosenbergs were on trial for espionage, Ruth snuck across the street to a payphone and called the White House to beg for clemency. The family's activities got Abe swept up into the McCarthy hearings. But social movements didn't interest Jimmy either. It seemed like nothing could pull him away from sports. Until one day in the 6th grade. A man came to Jimmy's school and asked the kids to sing. When it was Jimmy's turn, he belted the Star-Spangled Banner and found himself cast on the spot for the Metropolitan Opera Children's Chorus. They needed kids' voices for shows like Carmen and La Boheme and Boris Godunov. Jimmy started regularly appearing in the operas, and Abe was over the moon. And to Jimmy's surprise, he was too. He later wrote, "The opera was mesmerizing for me. The music, the costumes, the pageantry enthralled me. I felt like a kid in a candy store." But
I had no designs on the theater because my father was a legend in New York City, and growing up with a legend as a dad, if you have any kind of seckle about you, you don't want to be in the same business because it's too difficult for you as a kid in your mind, to ever surpass him or even be in the same fields.
the Burrows family was so famous that legendary journalist Edward R. Murrow interviewed them on television.
Jimmy, tell me, are you heading into show business like your dad?
Well, I thought about it, but I haven't made up my decision yet.
Abe had other ideas.
My father said to him, "Look, if I were a plumber, you'd be a plumber. I'm a director, you'll be a director."
His role in the opera got Jimmy into a performing arts high school. And as graduation got closer, he needed to figure out what he was going to be when he grew up. Time was running out to make up his decision. He enrolled at Oberlin College, a school known for its music program, its pioneering radio station, and he chose to study math. His plan was to leave showbiz behind. But the math wasn't mathing. "I just couldn't understand the theory of math," he later said. "So I became a government major." It's not a bad idea. There was a lot happening in politics. His senior year was the Cuban Missile Crisis. The U.S. was escalating tension in Vietnam, and the Cold War was threatening to break out into an all-out war. Like all American men, Jimmy was registered for selective service. And when he graduated in 1962, he didn't want to get called up for what he called an unjust war. His dad strongly urged him to apply to grad school, not a school where he'd pursue his government major, specifically the Yale School of Drama. So Jimmy was off to Yale, unsure what, if anything, he wanted to do there. He quickly discovered that his playwriting was, as he put it, just awful. He tried acting. Also not for him. He tried working in a production office. He tried being an audience coordinator. He tried everything but the one thing that he seemed to be avoiding.
So I took this directing course and I said, wow, I can do what a director does.
How could it have taken this long to realize that? It turned out being so close to Abe gave him kind of a mixed up view of what a director does.
I had no idea what my father did. I would watch him when I was a kid and not apply my mind or concentrate on what he did, because mainly he wrote. He wrote while he directed. He would rewrite all the time, so I thought he was a writer.
Jimmy hadn't considered there was a style of directing where you bring other people's writing to life.
So when Nikos said, "This is what a director does," I said, "Oh, holy shit, I think I can do that."
Jimmy spent 3 years at Yale, directing anything that he could. One popular show, entitled Bottoms Up, ran for months. Reviews called it a fast-paced, exuberantly presented hour of unparalleled comedy, described audiences tearing off the roof in paroxysms of laughter. That should have been a triumph for Jimmy. But reviews identified the director as Abe Burrows' son. Ads for the show put Abe's name before Jimmy's, like it was a triumph for his dad as much as for him. And now, look, there are worse problems in life than having your rich and powerful dad open doors for you. But Jimmy was falling into the trap that he was worried about years earlier.
I can't go into that business because I'll never be able to outdo my father.
So I can imagine it was frustrating, wanting to be his own man, but his whole identity inseparable from his dad.
I had no self-esteem. It was all who my father was. But
Jimmy graduated from Yale in 1965 in an incredibly fortunate position. A childhood steeped in arts and culture from his father and the New York Opera. An MFA from a prestigious school. His dad's connections throughout showbiz. Immediately, Abe whisked him out to Hollywood. He was working on a new sitcom and he had a job for his son. The show was called OK Crackerby, starring Burl Ives. That's the snowman from Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer. Jimmy's job wasn't directing Burl, but helping him run lines. And there was an unspoken understanding on the set.
I was, Abe's kid. That was my job. I was Abe's kid. I was a gopher staying at the Bel Air Hotel.
Their soundstage was between the old-fashioned My Mother the Car and Mel Brooks's Get Smart, the future of comedy. Between them, OK Crackerby was a pale imitation of Beverly Hillbillies. A show about the world's richest man, a boisterous southerner running circles around society types. Burl Ives played the titular Crackerby. Abe was the co-creator, he was the writer, he was the director. But there was a problem. When Jimmy was young, Abe was known for throwing amazing parties. Drinks were flowing. Just imagine the conversations between John Steinbeck and Truman Capote.
How do I look so young? Lots and lots of makeup.
Abe knew how to have a good time. But in recent years, His drinking was spilling out of the parties and into the workday. By the time Crackerby came along, it had become a problem. Jimmy could tell these scripts were not his best work. The show premiered in September of '65, aired for a couple of weeks, and then everyone was blindsided when the star, Burl Ives, sent a letter to entertainment reporters. He told them he was quitting the show because the writing's so bad. Specifically, the writing. We had a succession of different producers and directors, and the show never did get off the ground in the script department. Script and direction. That's Abe. ABC yanked Crackerby from the schedule. Abe was publicly humiliated in front of the entire industry and his son. So now Jimmy had to scramble for work. Abe tried to help him, but his name wasn't opening doors like it used to. Jimmy's job hunt stretched out for months until, defeated, he headed back home to New York. He landed an entry-level job with a company that did traveling shows.
I would drive a truck which had the scenery on it into the town where the show was going, set up the scenery, and then get the apprentices, who were all dressed in black, to learn how to make the scene changes.
He spent the next couple of months driving up and down the East Coast, setting up in fairground tents.
And I remember at rehearsal sitting there watching the director and thinking, he doesn't know what he's doing. You know what I mean? It doesn't seem, and I would watch. I would never say anything.
He was tantalizingly close to the creative work that he wanted to do, frustratingly unable to participate. But as the months went on, he found the job fulfilling, working with a large cast and crew, getting to watch rehearsals, seeing how shows come together away from Broadway and Hollywood. He stuck with it over the summer, and that fall, Jimmy got back to New York and heard that his father was writing and directing a new Broadway show. Abe had flopped in Hollywood, but Broadway was his element, where he'd won Tonys, the Pulitzer. He wrote and directed hit after hit, and there might be a job in it for Jimmy. The question was, should he stay with the steady job as a show tech, or take another risk with his dad?
I was the playwright's son. I said, can I work on the show? And he said, sure. So I became the assistant to the assistant stage manager.
The show was a musical adaptation of Breakfast at Tiffany's, and it looked promising. The lead, Mary Tyler Moore, was a huge star after the Dick Van Dyke Show. She had dreamed of being on Broadway, but she was under contract to Universal, so in exchange for getting time off, she had to agree to do some truly dreadful films.
Since the problems of life are insoluble, one should draw into complete isolation and live a life of total non-involvement with other people.
The sack is right.
The musical was based on a hit movie, and the movie was based on a hit novel, written by Abe's good friend, Truman Capote.
I'm the greatest. I'm number one.
But when out-of-town rehearsals start, Jimmy discovers there are problems. Abe hasn't gotten around to writing the second act. His plan was, I'll figure it out later. The producer, David Merrick, is unhappy with the main character. He tells Abe to make Holly Golightly tougher. In the next draft, people are shocked to hear Mary Tyler Moore swearing like a trucker. Abe's not bringing the right kind of edge to this show. Around this time, tastes were changing. Classic musicals like Guys and Dolls and How to Succeed were falling out of favor. New styles like Cabaret were coming up.
Screw Maximilian!
The producer, David Merrick, wasn't sure Abe had what it took. He tells the company he wants more depth. Why drown in 2 feet of water, he says. We might as well swim out and take our chances. So he hires Abe's friend, Edward Albee. He'd just had a big hit with Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf.
Fuck you!
Albee holes up in a hotel to work on a new draft. Takes a break every now and then to talk to reporters. Then a few days later, everybody gathers at the theater to read his new scenes. But just as they're sitting down, someone comes in with a copy of the Boston Globe. Albee thought that his conversation with the reporter was off the record. But there it is in black and white. None of what is really intrinsic in Capote's story has been captured on stage. None of it. What's there is corn syrup, sentiment, and a tidy ending. As it is now, it's dreadful, a boring failure. He complained about characters from the Borscht Circuit, and he said, all those awful jokes will have to be thrown out. I hope to substitute some genuine wit. The reporter got his own dig in, saying what the show really needed was a script doctor like Abe Burrows, before pointing out Abe's the one responsible for this mess. Abe was devastated. He got up to leave. He told him he couldn't work like this. And David Merrick, the producer, agreed. He told Abe he's fired. Another devastating and very public humiliation.
And so my father said to me, what do you want to do? Yeah. And I said, Dad, is it okay if I stay on? And I didn't have any idea that I was the enemy. because I was Abe's kid. I wanted the experience and everything like that.
In hindsight, Jimmy wrote, it was like booking passage on the Titanic. With Abe out, Albee has free reign over the script. And he says, the problem with musicals is there's too much music in them. This musical comedy, he says, is going to be dark. He cuts group songs, he cuts dances, he adds an abortion storyline.
That's hilarious.
Still in rehearsals, Jimmy can only watch as problems pile up. Albee writes a scene where a live cat's supposed to come out and play with a wadded up ball of paper.
Well, in order for you got to get a cat to play with the paper, you have to induce it or lure it to the paper, so they put minced ham on the paper. So Dick Chamberlain came out, and the first night he picked up his paper, squashed it, and you can hear, and all this stuff rolled down, all the minced ham down his arm. He threw the paper down, stalked off stage, the cat jumped out and went right for his hand.
And that's why, to this day, Broadway only uses human cats. As assistant stage manager, Jimmy's job is more technical than creative. Keeping things on schedule, calling cues, making sure the actors are in place, basically Scooter.
15 seconds to curtain, Miss Leachman.
Okay, Scooter, I'll be ready.
But before long, the entire production's fallen apart. During previews, the scenery breaks down, Jimmy has to haul it off by hand, dancing so it looks like he's in the cast.
It was the hottest ticket in town, because it was such a disaster. Mary was a basket case, would come off crying to me.
He learned that her comfort food was hamburgers and coffee, and he had that waiting for her coming off stage. He couldn't do anything to fix the show, but he could be there for Mary. In the wings, they'd commiserate about being stuck on a show that just wasn't working out.
We got to know each other really well, because there was nobody else to talk to.
After 4 previews, the producer, David Merrick, takes out a big splashy ad in the New York Times to announce he's shutting it down, sparing New York what he calls an excruciatingly boring evening. There's a miserable cast party that night, more like a funeral. Mary's husband, an ad executive named Grant Tinker, flies in from the West Coast.
We commiserated, Mary and I commiserated after Grant came in and rescued her.
Jimmy and Mary had come into this with such high hopes.
All right, this is gonna be my big game.
But now,
we're all out of a job.
Not an auspicious start to Jimmy's Broadway career. Maybe he'd have been better off staying far away from his father's work. But he had cast his lot. Then his next job was on Cactus Flower, which Abe wrote, and they took it on the road. It starred Lauren Bacall, an actress known for being outspoken about her preferences.
When I have a taste for a burger, that's what I order. If it's not on the menu, I glare at the waiter and say, improvise.
And she let Jimmy know when he screwed up.
She walks off stage and she says the first telephone bell was early and the second telephone bell was late.
Oh.
His next job was stage managing a show written by Abe called 40 Carats. Jimmy thought it was going pretty well. And then he overheard one of the actors.
She talked about what she'd been doing and had worked on Broadway in 40 Carats with Abe's kid Jim, and the man has no talent whatsoever.
That must have stung. Not only is he still Abe's kid, he's Abe's kid with no talent. That's not an entirely unfair impression. A lot of his work he'd only got through his dad. The one thing he was good at in school, directing, he hasn't had a chance to do. But maybe he was getting closer. As stage manager, one of his responsibilities was directing understudies, prepping them to take over for the main cast. In order to do that, he had to understand how the entire show worked. Everyone's part in the ensemble, all the blocking, all the timing, and he was getting experience working with actors, sometimes challenging actors, like Paris Hilton's step-great-grandmother, Zsa Zsa Gabor. She was a socialite turned actress, little stage experience, when she was cast in her Broadway debut, and she was very nervous. The person responsible for welcoming her into this intimidating environment was Jimmy. He knew the inner workings of the show better than anybody else. And he was there to guide her, comfort her, make sure she got to the stage on time, which was tougher than you might think. Zsa Zsa had a reputation for being a big personality. Sometimes she'd miss cues, primping in her dressing room. It was up to Jimmy to make sure she got to the stage no matter what.
Well, I really like your hair today.
Thank you, but you don't know what it looks like because of the door.
Wow, she finally figured that out.
Despite her difficult reputation, Jimmy was the one guy who found a way to connect with Zsa Zsa, get her out on time. She came to respect him and trust him, and he came to recognize a special power she had. The gays loved her.
Zsa Zsa Gabor.
Yeah. Zsa Zsa Gabor.
The audience was packed with gay men every night who adored her campy performance. Her audience was loving and loyal. Critics, not so much. Reviews were mixed. Too many weak one-liners, one said, adding Abe Burrows' direction lacked spontaneity. As theater goes, it's light entertainment, a frankly minor comedy. It wasn't the disaster of Breakfast at Tiffany's, but Pulitzer material it was not. During the run of the show, Jimmy had been finding his footing, but Abe was stumbling. Jimmy caught him hiding liquor around the house. Abe's mind was going. He had periods of confusion. The two of them took a trip to Europe. They were in London when Abe got an idea. He wanted to take Jimmy to a city he had always loved, Paris. Jimmy had had enough. He said, "I'll go if you stop drinking." In his memoir, Jimmy calls this moment totally uncharacteristic for him. His dad was a monumental figure in his life and in his industry. I can't imagine how hard it must have been to give this titan, his father, an ultimatum. But it worked. Abe stopped drinking. For a while. Back in the U.S., he relapsed. But Jimmy had taken a first step, and with help from loved ones, in 1969, they convinced Abe to go to rehab. That time, it stuck. He never drank again. The next year, Jimmy got a huge break, his first chance to direct on Broadway. It was a comedy called The Castro Complex, about a woman who has a crush on Fidel Castro, hides a communist revolutionary in her apartment. It seemed like it could be a good fit. Jimmy grew up with an American woman attracted to communism. And there was a great cast, the amazing Raul Julia.
Isn't he a lady killer?
Acquitted.
And Bernie.
Bernie, you animal, you are insatiable.
Doesn't anyone realize he's dead?
The actor Terry Kaiser, also a very good wizard in Mannequin on the Move.
Thank you so much.
Jimmy's directing debut was a flop. He later said, "I couldn't wrap my head around it. Didn't understand how to make it funny." In fact, the reviews specifically called out his direction. There are occasional farcical elements in the production, which can perhaps be attributed to the director, James Burrows. If so, he should have restrained himself. It's a review that echoes Edward Albee's criticism of his dad. Corn syrup and sentiment, borscht circuit, terrible jokes, all painting a picture of a show as lowbrow and trifling as OK Crackerby. After that swing and a miss, Jimmy got out of town. He directed shows in San Diego, he went on the road doing dinner theater. The thing with dinner theater is, you don't know if the audience is there for the show or the roast beef, so you gotta grab their attention. And here, Jimmy's style worked.
And then I got hired by a lot of dinner theaters because I could help. I was really fast and I could help make the show funnier.
He punched up the scripts, added bits of action and dialogue, which is something directors of licensed plays aren't supposed to do, so they had to be careful about how creative they got. More directing gigs with touring shows and dinner theater came, but it wasn't totally fulfilling. "I was doing well," he wrote, "but I still felt I was getting other people's laughs, not my own." Then he had an epiphany.
I'm directing Joan Fontaine in 40 Carats in Wallingford, Connecticut, and I go back to my hotel room on a Saturday night, and I go click, turn on the television, and there's the Mary Tyler Moore Show.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm watching it, and all of a sudden I say, "Oh my God, they're doing a play." It never occurred to me.
Mm-hmm.
And all of a sudden I said, "Oh my God, they're doing a play." And I know that woman. She was sweet and nice to me and everything like that.
He closes out the show and heads home to New York, still thinking about Mary Tyler Moore.
I had a relationship with them. I think Mary was impressed with me on Breakfast at Tiffany's.
And he decides to shoot a shot. He writes Mary a letter. "I think it is time for me to put it delicately, put my ass in gear and involve myself in television. So I thought I'd go right to the top, to the best." He asks if she has any openings, small or smaller. He mails it out, heads back on the road for a couple more weeks. When he gets home to New York, there's a letter waiting for him. It's from Mary's husband, Grant Tinker. He's running the production company with Mary. James opens it and he reads, "We're very interested in theatrical directors. Grant and Mary invite Jimmy out to Los Angeles to check out their operation and see if he could direct for television." A huge break. The Mary Tyler Moore Company has 2 hit shows.
Hi, I'm Mary Tyler Moore, and I just want you to know that starting this fall, Bob Newhart and I will be back-to-back every Saturday night on CBS.
Of course, the last time he went to LA, he needed his dad to get a job, and he still washed out. So as Jimmy headed west, the question was, how will he make it on his own? He arrived at Radford Studio in 1974, sprawling complex of sound stages in the valley. Once it was the site of Gilligan's Island's Lagoon, before it was paved over. Now it was home to the more cosmopolitan Mary Tyler Moore Show.
Do you think I'm undersexed? I hope so. Really, I'd like to think there's one thing I'm better at than you are.
The Bob Newhart Show.
It's probably the worst program ever on television. No, it wasn't.
The 4th episode of My Mother the Car was.
And soon spin-offs like Rhoda.
So tell me, what's been going on in your life?
Oh, let's see where to start. Nothing.
And Phyllis.
May I speak my mind?
Sure, we have a minute.
There were a few familiar faces waiting for him. Mary and her husband Grant, and someone he knew from New York, the actor Robert Moore. Robert had come out a few months earlier to play Phyllis's brother.
He is witty. He is attractive. He's successful. He's single. He's gay.
And after that guest spot, they hired Robert as a director. Like Jimmy, he had experience directing for the stage. He'd done The Boys in the Band off Broadway.
Hot stuff coming through.
There were also some TV legends walking around. Jay Sandrich, who directed The Odd Couple and would go on to do the pilot for The Golden Girls.
How long is this story? I'm 80. I have to plan.
James L. Brooks, who co-created The Mary Tyler Moore Show and would go on to create The Simpsons.
Hot stuff coming through.
Lorenzo Music, one of the writers on Smothers Brothers, and later, the voice of Garfield.
Good morning, sunshine. Welcome to another fun-filled day with your favorite pet.
I think he appeals to the lazy fat slob in all of us.
An incredible creative team. One of the most fertile atmospheres in showbiz. The perfect place for Jimmy to make his mark. And they told him his job was to do nothing. The Mary Tyler Moore Company had an apprenticeship program for new directors. And for the first few weeks, Jimmy was paid to just watch.
And for every week I was out there, I would get $400. And then for every show I did, I had to pay back $200.
His first day there, they sent him to the Bob Newhart show to watch rehearsals. There were bleachers set up for the studio audience.
I started in the last row of the audience.
Right.
And I had my orthopedic shoes on, so my back was killing me.
Uh-huh.
Little did I know it was psychosomatic. I started in the back, and I worked my way. Every week, I worked my way down a row.
He could see this wasn't so different from what he was doing on stage. On filming nights, they were playing to a live audience. But the difference is, they've got the writers right there. They can make as many changes as they want, and the show's only 26 minutes long. A month in, he made it down to the front row, and he was feeling ready to contribute, especially since his friend Robert Moore was directing that week's episode.
He was rehearsing a scene, and then he took a break, and I walked down. I said hello to him, and I said, I don't know why. I think it would be funnier if Bob was over here when he said that.
Jimmy was feeling pretty good. But that night, his phone rang.
I got a call from Grant Tinker saying, you're not watching the Newhart show anymore. You're being moved to the Mary Tyler Moore show.
So what happens is Bob Newhart didn't want you there.
It seemed Bob Newhart didn't appreciate the new guy trying to change his blocking. Not a great day at the office. So Jimmy was reassigned to the Mary Tyler Moore show, all the way back to the back row of the audience again. He spent a few more weeks working his way down on his best behavior, asking questions and trying not to step on any toes. And finally, they asked Jimmy if he was ready to direct an episode. He said yes. He got the script.
Then we read around the table. My first reading. Oh, I was so nervous.
The Mary Tyler Moore Show was in its 5th season at that point. CBS was reporting 30 million weekly viewers. It had racked up nearly a dozen Emmy wins. It seemed like every script was a guaranteed winner. And at the table read, they could tell.
And then we go to the table and we read it, and it's just terrible.
The episode's about Mary's boss, Lou, moving in upstairs and making her miserable. It's your basic coworker wears out their welcome sitcom premise that many shows had done before, including Mary's first sitcom, The Dick Van Dyke Show.
Maybe it was a mistake asking Buddy to come here and stay. He's just confusing our whole way of life.
And more recently, a season 2 episode of The Mary Tyler Moore Show.
Just going to be terrific living in the same building with you two girls.
The script they've assigned Jimmy to direct feels stale. The jokes don't land. But they're on a schedule. They got to make an episode a week. So the writers head upstairs to try to fix the script, and the actors go down to the set with Jimmy to see what they can do.
And I said, I don't know what to do. They're rewriting, and let's try to make the scene work.
Rehearsal is tense. The actors ask why they're bothering if it's getting rewritten. They're snapping at each other.
Will you shut up, Ted?
They spend the rest of the week hashing it out, and then, Friday night, the show must go on. Jimmy's first live studio audience arrives. They settle into the bleachers where he had been just a week earlier. The episode starts with Lou selling his home.
The real estate agent is showing a house again. I don't want to be there.
Why not?
I'm getting a little tired of him pointing to me and saying, try to picture the living room without him.
He wants to downsize, and as luck would have it, there's an open apartment in Mary's building, painted the opposite of millennial gray. But having her boss upstairs quickly gets awkward.
Who's that man sleeping on your couch?
My boss.
What kind of work did you say you do?
Sitcoms have been doing annoying neighbor stories for decades. But I think there are a few things that set this one apart. First, there's the way that Mary handles the situation.
Well, then why don't you just tell him you don't want him to move in? Because I find it very difficult to say no to people I'm close to.
She's in a painful position, wanting to be a good friend and coworker, and wanting to establish some clear boundaries.
Mr. Grant, we ought to get something straight.
What?
At the office, you're my boss, but here at home, you're not. You understand that?
In the 70s, for a woman to prioritize her needs over a man's feelings is huge. But that's not Mary's only pain point. Something that goes unspoken in this episode is why the apartment upstairs is empty. It's because her best friend, Rhoda, just moved to New York. The person Mary would normally go to with a problem like this is gone. She's missing her best friend. Lou's lost somebody too. It's never mentioned in the episode, but last season, his wife left him.
Let's face it, we both live alone. And this way, we don't have to worry about getting lonely.
It may look like an episode about bickering roommates, but it's really a story about loneliness. How it feels when the person who knew everything about you is suddenly gone. Lou expects Mary to fill the gap left by his wife.
I want to know what you're doing on my couch at 1 o'clock in the morning.
Well, you know I always fall asleep watching television.
No, I don't know that.
Mary expects Lou to be there for her like Rhoda.
I was late because I was upset over what happened last night. And you know I can't sleep when I'm upset.
I don't know that.
A tidy sitcom ending would have them each find what they were missing in each other. But this episode comes to a climax with Mary and Lou admitting this isn't working. He has to go. In rehearsals, this scene caused Jimmy the most stress. How do you make a breakup funny? As written, there were no jokes on the page.
You know, I'm treading water. I'm invoking anything I can.
In rehearsal, he told the actors,
I said, let's sit on suitcases and pretend it's the cherry orchard. I swear to God, I was invoking Chekhov.
That's the kind of note you get from a theater director. He's speaking their language as actors. And while it might seem like a bad idea, take the serious dialogue and make it more serious. Listen to how it plays.
You know, it's hard to leave this place. I'm used to it here.
We were only here for 2 weeks.
I know, but it seems like 3 or 4.
They hit a tone here that reminds me of Police Squad. Make it funny by playing it straight.
I was sorry to bother you at a time like this, Mrs. Twice. We would have come earlier, but your husband wasn't dead then.
Taking an unusual approach like this requires a ton of trust. Actors trusting writers to give them the right words. Writers trusting actors to understand the intent. And everyone trusting the director to bring it all together. And after that brutal week of rehearsal, that night of filming, Mary took Jimmy aside.
And Mary Tyler Moore came up to me and said, "We feel our investment in you has worked out."
And after the episode aired,
the next day, my phone didn't stop ringing. So from that one moment, my career really took off.
He was in. Now, finally, he might be able to show the world he was more than just Abe's kid. It was a tricky time to break into television, though, because Jimmy arrived in Hollywood at the same time as a moral panic over sex and violence.
Ladies and gentlemen, presenting the end of sex and violence on television.
In 1975, all 3 networks imposed what they called the family viewing hour. Half of primetime was suddenly off limits for anything remotely controversial.
I mean, how many things can you do with an egg? Especially during the family hour.
A problem was that nobody was sure what controversial meant. It was such an issue that Mary Tyler Moore and some other producers sued the networks to have it overturned. And they won. In the fall of '76, the networks abandoned the family viewing hour completely. And immediately, they assigned Jimmy to direct 2 groundbreaking episodes. The first was on The Bob Newhart Show. Bob's therapy group discovers their newest member is gay.
Isn't that nice? Just what the world needs, a little more gaiety.
The second was on Phyllis, when her boyfriend confesses he's been hiding the fact that he's gay.
In fact, I go to great lengths to hide it. I do ridiculous things, like dating you.
I have full videos about each of those episodes, and when you look at them together, what's remarkable is that until the mid-'70s, gay characters seldom showed up on sitcoms. You're more likely to see them on dramas, where they were often killers.
She was my sister. I loved her.
Then why kill her?
She knew about me. She knew I was homosexual.
So audiences might be unprepared to see gay characters in a comedy.
They were probably a little surprised by it. I know I was.
But Jimmy Burrows was uniquely qualified to tackle these two episodes for a couple of reasons. First, he grew up around openly gay people, his dad's colleagues like Truman Capote and Edward Albee. Jimmy had directed gay characters on stage in shows like Norman, Is That You? And he had gay colleagues like Robert Moore. And it's a little weird that Robert didn't direct these two episodes. He was probably busy at the time directing Murder by Death, starring Truman Capote.
Please forgive my hat. I'm losing my hair.
Jimmy understood that what humanizes the characters is the pain that they're going through. And he was an expert at finding laughs in pain. And that was also something that he'd grown up with. When Abe was asked if he'd ever direct a drama, he said he did direct dramas. They just happened to be funny. So, on the Bob Newhart show, when Bob's patient comes out, the rest of the group rejects him.
Let's not beat around the bush. We had a meeting and we voted the gay guy out.
On Phyllis, her boyfriend confesses the closet is ruining his life.
It's a pretty miserable way to live, isn't it?
These subjects might not seem very funny, but they show that these characters have troubles just like everybody else. And the jokes don't come at their expense.
I'm a gay person myself. A lot of people say to me, Lillian, you are a gay person. Oh. Then maybe you know my nephew, Kenny.
It was especially daring to come straight out of the family viewing hour with 2 episodes focused on queer characters, with no assurance that audiences and advertisers would be happy to receive them. But they went for it. And the gay guy on the Bob Newhart show even became a recurring character. Phyllis's ex did not, maybe because the series only lasted 2 seasons. But even in his one appearance, you can see there might be something to a sitcom about a straight woman who's friends with her gay ex. What James Burrows brought was clearly working. Over the next few years, he directed 19 episodes of Phyllis, 4 of Mary Tyler Moore, 4 of Rhoda, 4 of The Tony Randall Show, and 11 of The Bob Newhart Show. All of those shows were filmed next to each other at Radford Studios. It was a deeply collaborative atmosphere. Jimmy would spend hours listening to the writers' sessions.
So that I would know what was in their mind. And I could tell the actor what's in their mind and how we can help it and make it better without the writer feeling like we're stepping on their toes.
And he would encourage the actors to contribute their ideas.
Well, number one, create a safe space is good, which also leads you to getting people to be able to walk the comedy plank for you, which is, again, safe space. It's imbuing the actors, especially in what I do, imbuing the actors with confidence. Making them feel a part of the creative process.
He was fostering an environment where everyone's ideas were valued, like he had seen Abe do. Jimmy later said, "I learned from my father how to work on my feet. He created this wonderful camaraderie, which I always try to do. But camaraderie wasn't always guaranteed." After a few years as an in-house director for Mary Tyler Moore, Jimmy branched out. He picked up some jobs as a director for hire for another hit show, Laverne and Shirley.
That's when all hell broke loose on that show. That was insane.
This was a notoriously difficult production. Actors constantly fought over line count and screen time, which led to an incredibly tense set.
It blew up.
The breaking point came when Cindy Williams was pregnant and producers refused to give her time off, even had a shoot scheduled on her due date. Jimmy was coming in as a director of the week, so he couldn't do much to change the vibe on set. But the Laverne and Shirley folks must have liked his energy, because the showrunner, Gary Marshall, would repeatedly take him to lunch and ask him to produce the show. A huge career opportunity. Laverne and Shirley was one of the top shows on the air, and in television, producers have a lot more power than directors. But it was also one of the most toxic workplaces on television. And Jimmy's heart was in directing, not solving Laverne and Shirley's problems.
Incident, Gary Marshall would take me to lunch every year and want me to produce the show, and I said, there's just no way I'm going to do it.
Directing at Laverne and Shirley was eye-opening. As long as he was a hired gun director, there was no way of knowing what kind of set he'd be walking into week to week. Unless he could be part of a show from the start, help it develop from the ground up with people that he trusts. Jimmy wasn't the only one at the Mary Tyler Moore Company who was looking to branch out. One of the show's creators was James L. Brooks. That's him jogging past Mary in the opening. And after 7 years of writing and producing hundreds of episodes of television, creating numerous spin-offs, he had helped turn the Mary Tyler Moore Company into a media empire. And that was becoming a problem. He later said it was just getting too big. The company started with everybody knowing everybody, but by now it was getting a little more impersonal. We want it to be a small company again. So, Brooks and a few other writers formed their own company. And the first project right out of the gate was Cindy, a retelling of Cinderella set in Harlem with an all-black cast. It sounds like a good idea, since The Wiz had just been a big hit, and they had an amazing cast who had worked on numerous other Broadway shows. But this group of writers might not have been the right team to tackle the sound of Harlem. Entirely too square, said Variety. They needed something closer to their element. It was around that time they came across an article in New York Magazine about late shift cabbies in New York. A chaotic workplace where people from wildly different backgrounds meshed into a family. It's what had worked on other shows, on screen and behind the scenes, but if they were going to turn that into a new sitcom, they needed a director. They took their favorite one to lunch to ask if he was interested, and before they could finish the sentence, Jimmy said yes.
They sent me the script. The script was a great script. Incredibly overwritten, but the characters were just fabulous.
Another plus, while sitcoms were typically shot with a director of the week, they wanted to have one main resident director. That was something that was pioneered on I Love Lucy, where Jimmy's mentor, Jay Sandrich, got a start. And it meant that he could set the tone for the production week to week. Plus, they were casting the show with actors from his world, the New York stage. The main cabbie would be played by Judd Hirsch. He had just been in a Neil Simon play, and Jimmy had directed some Neil Simon before coming to L.A. And to play the mean dispatcher Louis, they cast another actor from New York with a Shakespearean background, an up-and-comer named Danny DeVito.
I wasn't there when Danny came in initially. I was there when he read at the network. He came in, threw the script on the table, and said, "Who wrote this shit?"
This was just the start of their search. They wanted the show to have a huge cast to fill the garage, and that was going to make Jimmy's job tough.
Well, it's probably the hardest show I've ever done. It's, number one, the biggest set, bigger than Cheers.
This is a much bigger, wide-open space than the living rooms and offices of most sitcoms. Plus,
7 characters without a bar to tether them.
To solve that problem, he leaned on his theater experience. He had the set dressers add fixtures and furniture, like a phone, a bench, a snack machine. And that way, there were places that characters could gather, like how he'd fill a big stage in a theater. But that also created a new problem. With that many people, plus extras and guests spread out in a huge space, it would be tough to capture all of the action. Taxi was going to be shot on film, and sitcoms shot on film had always been limited to 3 cameras, because film was expensive. Sitcoms shot on video could have 4 or more. They wanted to stick with film, which looks beautiful, but there was no way around it. They were going to have to add a 4th film camera. And that made planning everything way more complicated. It could take 8 hours just to block the camera movements, compared to 3 or 4 hours for a typical show.
I really worked hard. That was a hard show.
As Jimmy worked out the technical details, more stage actors came on board. Actress Mary Lou Henner, who'd been in Grease since she was 17, and Jeff Conaway, who played Danny in Grease, and later appeared in Jessica Fletcher's favorite drag bar.
I can explain everything.
The team was building a strong, stage-based foundation, and they'd build on that as the cast continued to grow, with a stage actor named Christopher Lloyd, as the future Doc Brown and Fester and Judge Doom, and Carol Kane, before Princess Bride and Addams Family Values and Star Trek.
You're like a space hippie.
Sitting in on the casting sessions, one of Jimmy's top priorities was building a cast that could trust each other. But there were some wild cards. A boxer with 0 acting experience named Tony Danza. Jimmy figured he could guide him.
You had Tony, who had really never acted before. Andy Kaufman, who came from left field.
It's hard to categorize Andy Kaufman as an actor or a comedian or a performance artist. He was known for SNL appearances where nobody was sure what the joke was, and for doing stand-up sets in an entirely made-up language. And later on for wrestling women.
I just want to say that there's an Intergender Wrestling Commission that they've awarded me with this championship belt. I'm now the World Intergender Wrestling Champion.
Andy was by far the most famous member of the cast. He wanted to keep touring while they were filming the show, so he demanded a special contract that would let him come to fewer rehearsals every week, sometimes skip entire episodes. His craziest condition involved Tony Clifton. Tony was a lounge singer who often opened for Andy, and Andy wanted Taxi to hire Tony for 4 episodes every season. What made that nuts is that everyone knew that Tony was actually Andy, but nobody was supposed to let on that they knew. So they drew up 2 separate contracts, one for Andy and one for Tony. This was a red flag. One of the main reasons that trust broke down at Laverne and Shirley was fighting over preferential contracts. But they started filming in 1978, and at first, the cast resented Andy. Of course. They had all given up roles on Broadway for this show, and he got not one, but 2 sweetheart deals. They're a couple weeks in when it's time to shoot a Christmas episode. Andy was going to be out that week, and it was time for Tony to make his first guest appearance. The first day of rehearsal, Tony shows up late, reeking of booze. He's brought 2 strippers with him. He doesn't know his lines. He says the writing stinks. He insults the other actors. The scene was recreated in the movie Man on the Moon.
Okay, bullshit, my line. Bullshit, my line. Oh! That's hilarious!
They do a run-through, and it's clear. They've got to fire him. So that evening, they call Andy, and he says it's fine if they want to fire Tony, but he wants them to do it on the set with everybody watching. So the next day, word started to spread. A crowd of people from the production company and ABC got into the bleachers to watch. Tony arrived, late again. One of the producers goes down to confront him. Tony argues back. He's not going to leave. This is starting to take a long time, and some of the other actors are getting pissed. Why do they have to stand around waiting for Andy to waste everybody's time like this? So Jimmy pulled the cast aside for a huddle. He told them, treat this like theater. Judd Hirsch got the message. He said, okay, I'll play. And he went back out to the set and he started yelling at Tony, as though he truly believed Tony was a real person. He was saying yes and, like an improv exercise. And that gave the rest of the cast an opening to join in. Now, it wasn't a joke being played on them. It was a joke they were a part of. Eventually, security arrived, kicked Tony out to Andy's delight. What they didn't know is that he had a friend waiting with a camera, and the next day, newspapers reported the whole thing. Andy returned to set. He listened to the stories about what had happened, shaking his head like he couldn't believe he missed it. And after that, there was no mention of bringing Tony back. With that out of his system, Andy was actually super professional. He was meticulous about knowing his lines, prepared for scenes despite missing rehearsals. He was always in character as Latka, even when he was just in the background. Like, watch him here, trying to tighten bolts on a tire. Jimmy found a solution to a thorny problem by bringing everyone together in a spirit of theater. Andy got what he wanted. The rest of the cast didn't feel like they were a bunch of second bananas in the Andy Kaufman show. And that was just one way that Jimmy brought a theatrical approach to the show that sometimes makes Taxi feel less like a TV show and more like a pro shot of a play. Part of that is his stagey tweaks to the set, but also how he directed scenes to flow into each other. Instead of cutting, cameras move across the stage, following the action. Scenes on Taxi are often longer than on most TV shows, and the action unfolds in what seems like real time, in one location, as characters come in and go out. In a strange way, the fact that episodes unfold around a central action, a central place, and a single time mimics a dramatic form established by Aristotle 2,000 years ago, known as the classical unities.
Is it Greek?
Jimmy was employing a lot of the techniques he'd learned from his dad back on Broadway, like directing with his eyes closed so he could hear the rhythm of the dialogue. It gives the episodes a musical quality that feels like it's on stage. And another of his father's techniques, a focus on collaboration. On some shows, there's a feeling of the writers fighting with everybody to get their vision across, but Jimmy took a different approach. He started spending as much time as he could with the writers, especially 2 brothers, Glenn and Les Charles.
It's a collaborative process with the writers. It's not enemy and friend. It's collaborative. You're trying to make it better.
Another unusual move was he brought the writers to rehearsals.
You want them on the floor. Mm-hmm. You want them involved.
And he encouraged the actors to pitch their ideas.
You don't want them puppets. You want them giving you ideas. Mm-hmm. And, if you don't like an idea of an actor, you don't say, I hate that. You say, maybe try it this way.
Jimmy saw his job as clearing a path for the writers and the actors to contribute as much as they could, so he could then bring the best ideas together into a singular vision. Audiences of the 1970s were probably not thinking about collaboration and set design and Greek theater. They just knew they loved this show.
Every Friday night, the audience would go crazy. They loved that show. Wild laughter. And some of the best, some of the greatest sitcom individual episodes ever.
Taxi was a hit right out of the gate. It was a top 10 show. It won a bunch of Emmys, including an Emmy for Jimmy, for directing an episode where Danny DeVito's character falls in love with his real-life girlfriend, Rhea Perlman.
How do you do?
Hi.
Across the first couple seasons, I think one of the most interesting episodes is called Elaine's Strange Triangle. It starts with the Elaine character feeling down about her love life. Tony Danza's character, Tony, wants to set her up with a nice guy that he just met named Kirk.
Hi. Are you 2 together?
Yeah, we're together.
Oh, you mean she and I? No, we're just friends.
Elaine and Kirk click. But he has to confess something to Tony.
Remember the night I came up to you two at the bar, I said, "Are you two together?"
Yeah, I told you we weren't.
Well, she wasn't the one I was after, Tony.
On a lot of shows, the dilemma now would be Tony freaking out that a man made a pass at him. And at first, Tony's thrown. He doesn't know who to talk to.
I ain't going, Louis. I got a problem.
Oh, not again. The one on the left's the brake. The one on the right's the gas.
Andy Kaufman's character, Latka, seems unexpectedly receptive.
You know anything about bisexuals?
Well, of course. They are very popular in my country.
Though maybe there's been a misunderstanding.
One of our favorite sports is racing them. When we are not using them, we have special racks where we chain them up at night.
Latka, I'm not talking about bicycles. I'm talking about bisexuals.
So am I.
Eventually, Tony confides in Alex. And we learn that Tony isn't so much troubled that a man made a pass at him, but more about what this means for Elaine.
See, now the point is here, Alex, is that this could go rough on Elaine.
Tony and Alex make plans to meet Kirk at a Times Square gay bar to straighten out any misunderstandings. And this is what the bar looks like.
Alex. Oh, hi, Kirk. Hello. Hi. How you doing? Tony here yet?
Who is responsible for this? Don Draper.
I feel bad for you.
I don't think about you at all.
Not that one. Judd Hirsch's gay assistant, who told the set designer, make the bar less campy. Lose the Broadway musical posters and replace them with miscellaneous hubcaps. And an adults-only boob leg by the French artist Richard Lindner, whose work was known for mixing the mechanical and erotic. Of course, no gay bar is complete without a 4-player fun fest. And to complete the look, ferns, ferns, ferns. And bisexual corner, where we find Kirk. Alex tries to let him down easy.
Look, Kirk, I have a really terrible, difficult thing to talk to you about, and I don't even know how to start.
The conversation goes surprisingly well.
But I've already told Elaine that I'm bisexual. Shh. Oh, okay. It's okay here. Anyway, we're still friends, and we had a fine talk. Oh, and by the way, I understand that Tony's not interested, and that's okay, too.
But Alex isn't out of the woods yet.
Excuse me, would you like to dance?
No, I'm just having a beer with a pal, thanks.
Don't be shy.
No, I really can't.
Honestly, I wish more gay bars were like this. Look at these adorable extras. I love this little sweater guy. These actors were hard to find. When Taxi put out the casting call for a scene in a gay bar, nobody responded. So Don Draper had to rustle up some gays last minute. He went to a coming out support group and he said, I need to find 15 men by this afternoon, to which someone replied, who doesn't? So he hit the motherlode, which I can tell you does not look like this, though I can personally vouch for its dumpsters. Like Jimmy's other episodes with queer characters, this is a shockingly good depiction for its time. It's one of the first bisexual characters on American television, nearly 15 years before they were discovered by Newsweek. And Kirk's interest in Tony isn't treated like it's absurd. Instead, it's an entirely valid thing that he could be interested in a man. Also, the jokes never come at Kirk's expense. The comedy is in the straight character's discomfort about the misunderstanding. Not every depiction of a queer character on Taxi would be so respectful.
I'm Alex Rieger. I worked with Elaine.
Oh, my God, the fleet's in.
Jimmy didn't direct that one. But the one that he did direct, with the bisexual love triangle, was especially well received. Critics called it offbeat and well written. It won an Emmy for Judd Hirsch, well deserved, and a second Emmy for Jimmy. Now he was on a roll. And so was the show. Over just 5 years, Taxi got 34 Emmy nominations and 18 wins. There was a third Emmy for Jimmy and a Directors Guild Award. Taxi was a top 10 show for several years running. It was a vindication of his approach to making television. But that's not how he saw it. Jimmy didn't feel like he deserved the credit for Taxi's success. To him, it was the writers and the actors who did the heavy lifting. He just made sure they were working together. These awards made him feel like an imposter. So as Taxi wrapped up its 4th season, he decided to step away. Taxi lasted another year without him and then got canceled after a dispute with ABC that got a little heated. More of that story on Patreon. With Taxi in his rearview mirror, Jimmy decided it was time for something new. He needed to find a project he could truly call his own. He had tried to make that happen on stage. He tried on TV. So what was next? Maybe film. Movies are more of a director's medium than television, and it could be a place where he might make a mark apart from his dad. Around this time, Paramount had a script for an edgy new comedy, and they needed a director. It was written by Francis Weber, whose last project was the drag comedy La Cage aux Folles, and it was called Partners. A buddy comedy about a gay cop and a straight cop going undercover in the gay community to catch a serial killer. A movie that dared to ask, what if cruising was funny? Jimmy liked the script and signed on. He seemed like a good choice. No other director had tackled gay comedy on television as often or as successfully as he had. For the casting, Jimmy wanted an iconically macho actor to play the straight cop, like Clint Eastwood or Charles Bronson, opposite a fresh-faced, sprightly twink. For the twink, naturally, Paramount insisted on world-weary 40-year-old John Hurt. And for the paragon of masculinity, pretty boy heartthrob Ryan O'Neal.
And it just went downhill from there.
John Hurt was just coming off of Elephant Man, and I can't fathom why Paramount insisted on him, other than that 5 years earlier, he had played a funny twink opposite a bear in The Naked Civil Servant.
You want to clean up? This place is filthy.
I have discovered a great labor-saving secret. After the first 4 years, the dust doesn't get any worse.
As it is, the characters and partners are clearly written to be younger than they are.
Oh, you're a nice young couple. Oh, children.
The dialogue doesn't always feel natural.
Let's take off all our clothes and play in the water together.
And do the jokes hit?
You don't want to work with Curran because you're scared. He's gay. It's dangerous. He might rape you.
That's hilarious.
And for a comedy, it spends a lot of time on the murder mystery. But the only thing I found interesting about that was the killer apparently lived around the corner from my old apartment.
Be at the corner of Santa Monica and Doheny.
Hey, I know that place. Plus, John Hurt plays the twink character as a deeply sad man, which certainly humanizes him, but it's not especially funny. On the page, he reads as a pathetic clown, and in the original ending, the character commits suicide when he finds out the macho cop doesn't want him.
I don't get it.
Partners came out in 1982, a fascinating time since it's the same year as Tootsie and Victor Victoria, two great comedies that poke fun at masculinity.
Shame on you, you macho shithead.
I think Partners could have joined them in saying something interesting about how there are different ways to be a man, and that limiting yourself to only one can do harm. But the film just never gets there. Jimmy had a rough time adjusting to movie making.
I just don't like the fact of having to do a scene 3 times.
Until now, Jimmy had been shooting sitcoms basically live to film, putting them on like a play, an approach that's totally alien to how most movies are made.
It was not my métier. It's no audience. It's no spark. It's no live theater. I love the theater.
When Partners came out, Paramount executive Barry Diller, who's himself a gay man, called it the essence of a badly made movie. Well, maybe critics would be kinder.
It's a very depressing film to sit through.
I agree with you.
Jimmy's take?
The film was a bomb.
Why?
I was not as good as I am now. I didn't have the balls. I didn't have the confidence.
He never directed a film again.
So Jimmy went back to television. Around this time, he took on a string of new projects that looked like they ought to be hits. There was The Associates, a TV series with a fantastic cast led by Martin Short. Critics loved it. It was nominated for awards, but it was programmed against Archie Bunker's Place. It got demolished in ratings. It was quickly canceled. Then there was A New Kind of Family, starring a young Rob Lowe and Janet Jackson. But that was programmed against 60 Minutes, another ratings juggernaut, and it didn't last a season. Then there was Sisnick, with Oscar winner Ned Beatty. But aside from having a title that nobody could say or spell, a New York Times critic called the writing boring, and said that on a scale of 1 to 10, the plot comes in at about 1.5. Jimmy also directed a series called Best of the West, an Old West sitcom that asked, what if Blazing Saddles had nothing to say?
Well, adios.
Sure.
The most exciting project was called P.O.P. It was produced by Norman Lear. It was about a woman and her ex-husband running a newspaper together. It starred B. Arthur and Fran Drescher. NBC executives didn't think it was funny. They pulled the plug after one airing, and now it's lost media. Then there was The Betty White Show, which is filled with strange choices. Starting with the theme song. That also lasted less than a season. It was starting to look like Jimmy's earlier success might have been a fluke. He was close to the age that his dad had been when his work started to decline. Maybe Jimmy peaked with Taxi. Maybe he was right to feel like an imposter. That he had it, and now he lost it. He went to his friend and mentor from the Mary Tyler Moore Company, Jay Sandrich. And Jay told him, You'll never know how good you really are until you become your own boss. Okay, but how? Jimmy mentioned his problem to two friends, writers on Taxi that he'd gotten friendly with, Glenn and Les Charles, or as he knew them, the brothers.
The brothers! The brothers!
They were feeling frustrated too, and the three of them started imagining if they could create any new show for themselves, what would it be? They formed a new company together with no contracts, just a handshake, and their dream was to make a show by good friends about good friends. And their inspiration was Fawlty Towers.
You stupid, stuck-up, toffee-nosed, half-witted, upper-class piles of pots!
A show about people who hate each other, made by John Cleese and his soon-to-be ex-wife. Jimmy and the brothers loved Fawlty Towers, but a direct adaptation would probably not have been embraced by American audiences, as another team discovered.
What do you think of this hotel? I think it's a totally inefficient zoo run by a mad woman.
Fortunately, their instincts took them further from that original source. Instead of a hotel, they thought a bar. At first, they wanted to set it between Las Vegas and LA so wacky characters could pop in. But Jimmy was still crazy about sports. So he pushed for a sports bar, and that made more sense in a town like Boston. They found some inspiration in a real-life pub in Boston called the Bull and Finch, and gradually their concept shifted from the world's most stressful hotel to something more friendly, encapsulated by a line in the theme song that they wanted.
That line, which I think is more identifiable with the show than any other line ever, which is where everybody knows your name, it says everything you want to know about that bar.
To make the bar as inviting as possible, they hired Richard Silbert, a prestigious Oscar-winning set designer. He'd done Virginia Woolf, Chinatown, The Graduate.
We tried to make the bar as beautiful as possible because we wanted it to look rich, because America had to come to that bar every week.
TV's tastes had shifted toward affluence after Ronald Reagan was elected. Gone were shows like Welcome Back, Kotter, Sanford and Son, Taxi. Now it was Facts of Life, Family Ties, and Who's the Boss, which brought back Tony Danza not as an urban cabbie, but as a suburban housekeeper working for a wealthy ad exec, her drag queen mother, and her gay son. Cheers isn't exactly a luxury setting, but it's definitely more upmarket than the garage of Taxi. And as the concept for the show, which they called Cheers, came together, the Charles brothers wrote a pilot script and they sent it to Jimmy.
Reading that script on the plane, I was laughing so hard that the stewardess came over and asked me if I was all right.
They'd written a classic screwball comedy about two deeply flawed people maddeningly infatuated with each other.
And so we talked about Tracy Hepburn, that kind of relationship. Miss Uptown, Mr. Downtown.
The leading lady, a grad student who can't go back to academia after a failed romance.
I do need a job, and I'll find one. And you can bet that it won't be waiting tables.
What are you qualified to do?
Nothing.
For the leading man, a baseball player whose career was derailed by alcohol.
I developed an elbow problem. I bent it too much.
You were a drunk?
Are you kidding? He was a great drunk.
They can't stand each other, and yet they're intrigued by each other.
Yes, I'll take a message. You're welcome.
Well?
You're a magnificent pagan beast.
Thanks. What's the message?
I read the script and I called the boys and I said, you brought radio back to television. It was a show about people who came into a bar and talked. So you could literally do the show on radio and it would have been a big hit.
Whether he realized it at the time, the concept that Jimmy and the Charles brothers had zeroed in on was awfully familiar.
Hello, Duffy's Tavern, where the elite meat to eat. Archie the manager speaking. Duffy ain't here.
In later interviews, Jimmy joked maybe his dad ought to sue him.
Jim's own relationship with his dad proved crucial in the early stages of Cheers.
After seeing the first show, he said, the bartender needs more dirt under his nails, which was his way of saying that Teddy needed to be a little rougher. And he was right.
And now, they'd have to convince TV executives to put it on the air. They had an in at NBC, since that's where Taxi had landed for its fifth season. But Jimmy's personal flop era was nothing compared to what was happening at NBC.
ABC earned $295 million last year. CBS earned $249 million. And NBC earned $75 million, less than half what it earned the year before.
The joke around the industry was that in a three-way race for ratings, NBC was coming in fourth. In part, that was because of Fred Silverman. He was responsible for some of the biggest shows of the 70s at CBS and ABC. There's the Mary Tyler Moore Show, The Price is Right, Laverne and Shirley, Scooby-Doo. But then Fred came to NBC, and it was one flop after another.
One of his most spectacular programming failures, Supertrain. Another, The David Letterman Show, a ratings disaster.
Fred put Letterman on during the daytime instead of late night. He commissioned a variety show where the hosts had to learn their lines phonetically because they didn't speak English.
What do you think?
Wonderful.
And for some reason, he demanded multiple shows starring chimps. Soon, ratings were in the basement. Fred tried to bolster enthusiasm by commissioning a theme song for the network.
NBC, we're proud of our mystery, so proud. We got a lot of variety, proud.
Employees made their own version.
So loud, it doesn't matter, we're not the best. Loud, we're gonna screw around and run this network in the ground. The peacock's dead, so thank you, Fred. Yeah, thanks a whole lot.
Local affiliates were starting to give up on the network, switching to ABC and CBS. Analysts talked about NBC entering a death spiral. NBC desperately needed a hit. But was Cheers going to be it? A sitcom from a pair of writers whose last show was out of fashion? A director coming off a string of flops? And a trio who'd started a company that so far had never made anything? Well, there was one thing working in their favor. When NBC fired Fred Silverman,
the new boss at NBC, Chairman and Chief Executive Officer, is Grant Tinker, the head of MTM Enterprises.
Mary Tyler Moore's husband, who brought Jimmy out to L.A., gave him a shot in television, he was the new head of NBC. And he saw to it that Cheers got on the schedule. It launched in September of 1982 with one of the best TV pilots ever made. For one thing, the set looks gorgeous on film. But more importantly, the jokes are great.
Excuse me. Where is your bathroom?
Next to my bedroom.
We see Sam and Diane in moments of vulnerability.
I wonder why people tell bartenders their problems. It's kind of sad, isn't it? These poor wretches with no one in the world to turn to but some stranger who mixes drinks. I met Sumner 2 years ago.
And then after a little heartbreak, we get a solid laugh.
Am I stupid to let you go see a woman you were once in love with?
Oh, my darling, I'm leaving you alone in a bar. Which one of us is the stupider, Sam?
Too close to call.
I mean, we knew we had something special. We knew that from the first run-through of that show.
What did America think?
1 week we finished dead last. 72nd. It was abysmal.
Why was nobody watching? Well, maybe because NBC advertised it like this.
You probably think the brightest, freshest new comedy of this season will be on ABC. CBS? The brightest, freshest new comedy of the season is called Cheers, and it's coming to NBC. That's right, NBC. That's right.
Who even is that lady? She's not on the show. They don't even show you what Cheers looks like. The few people who did watch Cheers loved it. Critics loved it too. They said it was perfect. The only thing it needed was 10 million more viewers so it wouldn't get canceled. And that was a real danger. NBC had just canceled the renewed Taxi, so Cheers could easily be next. That's when the team decided to take a crazy risk. Early in the run, when ratings were still in the danger zone, Jimmy directed a gay episode. I have a separate video about that one, but to summarize, one of Sam's old teammates comes out as gay. Sam stands by him.
Can we get a couple more shots of you guys?
Sure, you bet.
I appreciate this, Sam. Look at,
Well, you didn't dump me when I had a drinking problem.
sure I did. You were just passed out at the time.
Yeah.
But then the regulars start worrying that'll make Cheers a gay bar.
I don't believe that stuff. Bars don't turn gay overnight.
You don't have to believe me. I have scientific proof. Cliff?
It happened.
See?
Now, they should be so lucky, but things escalate when they suspect that two newcomers might be gay men.
Oh, listen, could we have light beers, please?
Light beer?
And they insist that Sam throw the new guys out for it to be an explicitly no gays allowed bar.
We don't serve their kind here.
What? It's an extremely well-directed episode. You can see how conflicted Sam is. He's a jock. You might expect him to be homophobic, and the sports bar is his livelihood.
I mean, these guys are my regulars. If I lose my regulars, I lose my bar. And if single women stop coming in here, I have no reason to live.
About 10 years had passed since Jimmy's first gay episodes, so this kind of storyline wasn't as novel for television anymore, but it's still very impressive because of another change of television after the election of Ronald Reagan. Not only were shows looking more affluent, there was a general conservative turn. Shows either dropped queer characters or changed them to be straight. And of course, Something else had just happened.
Bobby Campbell of San Francisco and Billy Walker of New York both suffer from a mysterious, newly discovered disease, which affects mostly homosexual men.
This episode aired at a time of skyrocketing stigma against gay men. In bathrooms, in sports, in jobs, schools, hospitals, bars. That's the background for this dialogue.
Hey, listen, those guys are staying. Anyone else wants to leave, that's fine.
Okay, Sam, you know what kind of bar this could turn into?
It's not going to turn into the kind of bar that I have to throw people out of.
That was the noblest proposition you've ever dangled.
Thank you.
Sam's taking a stand not just for his friend, but for queer people in general being welcome at Cheers. This was a time when the show needed to reach as many people as possible, and they're doing something that could alienate a lot of the audience instead. It's remarkable. But remember what the theme song says.
You wanna go where people know people are all the same.
A cornerstone of the show is people connecting over drinks, seeing they're not so different. This episode of Cheers was nominated for an Emmy, and it lost to an episode of Cheers, the pilot. Now, awards don't always mean survival. Jimmy got nominations for The Associates, one of his flops. But over the summer, NBC reran Cheers. They scheduled against the mystery show Simon & Simon. And the thing about mysteries is, once you've seen it solved once, you probably don't need to see it again. So a lot of that crowd clicked over to Cheers. That boosted the numbers just enough to earn them a season 2. They went from 74th place to 34th. That was good enough for season 3. In season 3, it was 13th. And from that season on, it was in the top 10 for the rest of the run. 11 seasons total. In that time, Jimmy directed more gay episodes, one where Norm is assumed to be gay and goes with it because it gets him hired as an interior decorator.
You sure do make a cute couple.
Just accept the compliment, honey.
And another where Rebecca's high school boyfriend visits.
Aren't you supposed to be Rebecca's old flame?
Well, I'm not that old.
That's Harvey Fierstein, an icon of New York theater, known for groundbreaking projects like the Tony-winning Torch Song trilogy and Food Fight.
I just want to be loved. Is that so wrong?
And as Cheers went on, they weren't afraid to complicate the characters and even explore their darker sides. In one episode, Sam loses a token of his sobriety and he's scared he's going to start drinking again.
It's the cap off the last bottle of beer I ever drank. Last anything I ever drank. When I was tempted to have a drink, sometimes I'd look at the bottle cap, and it would stop me.
Diane stays with him after hours, afraid he'll start drinking if she leaves. She's desperate to help him, but powerless to make him do anything. He's her boss, an authority figure, the de facto dad of the show.
I tell you what, even better, let's just talk, you know?
Well, what are you going to tell me that I haven't heard 100 times, huh?
Diane is in an impossible situation of having to take responsibility for a guy who's supposed to be looking out for her and for all the other people who work for him.
Oh, come on, Sam. It's important that you not be here today, huh? You don't want to be in a bar.
Where am I going to be tomorrow night? And the next, and the day after that, huh? I'm going to be in a bar, right?
The performances here from Shelley Long and Ted Danson are outstanding. It has the energy of a child confronting an alcoholic parent. A few seasons later, Diane leaves and Sam relapses. When she comes back, she arranges an intervention led by a new character.
Hello, Sam. I'm Dr. Frasier Crane.
This is similar to something that Jimmy actually experienced, getting his family together to help his dad. And both of these episodes feel deeply authentic. There's an understanding of when to go for the joke and when not to, and that keeps it from getting too detached from reality or from feeling like a very special episode. Winning awards, finding their audience, Cheers was a huge hit. They had close to 30 million viewers at their height. Kurt Vonnegut said, "I'd rather have written Cheers than anything I've written." As Cheers cemented its place in the top 10, Jimmy could start branching out. Spin-offs like Frasier.
He did a wonderful thing with David Ed Pearson. We were rehearsing for the pilot of Frasier.
Jimmy said, "What if you took a handkerchief out of your pocket and wiped off the chair?"
And that was the birth of the OCD Niles.
New shows like Friends, News Radio, Third Rock from the Sun.
I feel so utterly exposed and vulnerable. And not in that fun, spanky way.
NBC called their Thursday must-see TV, and across the 90s, it was the dominant place for television comedy.
You ever wonder why all the best comedies are always on NBC?
Jimmy was one of the primary figures shaping it. Now, there was the occasional miss, like a pilot for a sitcom called Gloria Vane, which was about a fading Hollywood star in the 1930s.
What are you doing in Hollywood?
I want to be a great actress. I want to be just like Aunt Gloria.
Which is it, child?
Honestly, I think this is a lot of fun. It even has queer characters.
Do you have any idea what you'd be if I'd never worked with you?
Heterosexual, probably.
That one never made it to series. More about Gloria Vane over on Patreon. But even that project wasn't a total loss. The writer of the pilot was Joe Keenan, whose work Jimmy loved. And Joe came over to write for Frasier. There, he wrote some of the series' best farces. And queer episodes.
Don't take this wrong, but it never even occurred to me that you might be gay.
Well, it never even occurred to me that you might be straight.
On the heels of Cheers, Jimmy had established himself as the second coming of Abe Burrows.
In this crowd, they call him the Doctor, as in show doctor. Same thing they called his dad 50 years ago on Broadway.
But he still hadn't created anything that only Jimmy Burrows could have done. Then, in 1997, he came across a script for a new show that was different from any other pilot he'd seen.
I read Will and Grace in November of '97. I knew that the boys had captured a genre and a group of characters that I had never read before.
The boys were Max Muchnick and David Cohen. Two friends, one straight, one gay, and they'd been working their way up as TV writers for years, from The Wonder Years to Dream On to Boston Common, but they wanted to create a show that was all their own, similar to how Jimmy had felt when he was their age. They'd written a pilot script based on their own lives, and how years earlier, when Max came out of the closet to his then-girlfriend, they had a little falling out, and then David got the two of them talking again, and they all wound up best friends. Now, we're probably all familiar with this kind of friendship between a gay man and a straight woman, but at the time, there really hadn't been anything like it on television. There was a chance to tackle a relationship that a lot of viewers had probably never seen before, if they could get it made. Word got back to Max and David that Jimmy Burrows was interested, and that had them nervous.
Jimmy Burrows had this reputation. Was he going to be this 800-pound gorilla? We hadn't worked with him. We were afraid that he was going to kind of dominate the proceedings.
At this point, Jimmy wasn't just a sitcom director. He was the sitcom director. He was powerful enough that if he wanted to take the show from them and run it himself, he could. They agreed to meet over breakfast. As Max and David arrived, they were ready for him to throw his weight around.
We're like, we are going to go in there, we're going to say, hey, this is our baby, we love this thing, and, if you don't get on board with what we're thinking, then we can't use you. Right, Max? Right, Dave. So we get into the restaurant. Jimmy says, so I read the script, I think I want to do it. And Max and I look at each other and we're like, okay, great. And that is the story. I mean, that was it. We had nothing to talk about for the rest of breakfast.
And he left us with the bill.
Instead of trying to run their show, he wanted to work for their show, advising them, but not as a boss.
When I read that script, I went, oh my God, these guys have written a show that has a distinct point of view that's not on television. How do I protect that point of view? So my job after that is to make sure the Max and David's vision is kept intact.
But he knew that was going to take more than just directing the pilot and then turning the show over to somebody else. For Will and Grace, he wanted to do something he hadn't done in a long time. Stay on as resident director. And even with the 800-pound gorilla on their side, this was not going to be easy. It was a particularly tough time to attempt a show with queer leads. In part because of this.
Susan, I'm gay.
Ellen's coming out episode was a huge media event. And then the ratings cratered. I have another video about why that happened, but the conventional wisdom at the time was that viewers simply would not watch a show with a gay lead.
It became a program about a lead character who was gay every single week. And I just think that was too much for people.
Well, she is gay every single week, though.
There had been one queer-led sitcom in the 1980s, the show Brothers on Showtime. But premium cable was different from broadcast. Those shows were paid for by subscribers. On network television, you needed advertisers.
And the great fear was advertisers would run from it.
Unless they made one little change.
We were asked after we read the pilot, take this note in, don't react, but what do you think about not having Will be gay?
It's not like Max and David could push back on notes like that. They didn't have the clout to protect their vision. But Jimmy did. He went to NBC and he told them just to trust him. He'd done enough shows at this point that he knew how to make this work. First, he said, don't promote Will and Grace too heavily. It's different from what viewers are used to.
And if you're trying to do something different, you have to sneak into town.
Expect to start with a small audience, he said, and then they can build from there. And one more thing.
I told Max and David, I think we should try the first year to make America believe that Will's going to recant and marry Grace.
Straight baiting. Make it look like the Cheers pilot, a will they won't they rom-com that'll just take some time to develop. Hook the viewers who might be hesitant about gay characters, and then hopefully, once they see that the show's good, they'll stick around. There was some precedent for this. Shows Soap and Dynasty both started with gay characters who eventually ended up with women. And sure enough, here's how NBC initially marketed the show.
Check out Will and Grace. They're friends, best friends, only friends. I mean it.
And Jimmy made sure that there was some teasing in the first season that Will and Grace might get romantic. Like he predicted, at first, the audience was small, and NBC was antsy.
We used to get to know too many homo jokes. Those comments like that make me crazy. I just said to the network, that's what we do. That's what this show can do.
He knew they just needed to stay true to the show, give it time to find the audience. This was exactly where he had been with Cheers. And his contribution wasn't just protecting the show from network interference. It was also his decades of experience creating a good environment on set, making sure everyone's creative contributions were valued, bringing the writers to set, encouraging actors to pitch jokes.
So we just come back in the circle and we just pitch on lines until something hits us and makes us laugh, and then we run in and I try to remember it.
It's very theater-like. It's a place to come and play and feel safe and experiment in a lot of ways.
For season 1, Will and Grace ran on Mondays and Tuesdays. Viewership was soft. But then, NBC gave them a one-night-only tryout on Thursday, in the must-see TV block that Jimmy had helped shape. And in that 1 week, the ratings nearly doubled. And over the next season, it kept climbing. The show that the industry said could never work became one of the most watched sitcoms of the decade.
I'm stopped on the street by people and saying, I have to thank you. You make me laugh. Laughter's healing medicine. We need to laugh more.
And Will and Grace even inspired imitators. Normal Ohio, some of my best friends, Charlie Lawrence. And because of Will and Grace's premise, it could tell stories that no other show could. When other television shows had their occasional gay episodes, they usually had to spend some time walking up to the subject, showing the characters realize there's a gay in their midst, dealing with this new concept. And that's fine. But with Will and Grace, you could just assume it's a gay episode and get right to the homo jokes, because the characters are gay every week. For instance, other sitcoms had done coming out stories from the straight character's perspective, but Will and Grace had an episode from Jack's point of view, where he debates whether he should come out to his mother.
Tonight at dinner, I'll tell my mother I'm gay.
Dad, I would think after 30 years it would be kind of liberating.
Oh, no, we're not telling her I'm 30.
And they show us what this decision looks like for a queer person.
I've kept this from you for a long time, and that's wrong, because it makes it seem like I'm ashamed of something I'm not ashamed of. I want you to know who I am because I'm proud of who I am.
This is a perspective a lot of straight viewers had probably never thought about before. It might help them understand why someone is coming out when it happens in real life. And then there's an episode when Will's dad pretends that his son is straight.
You haven't told these people I'm gay?
What, do you walk around telling all your colleagues that I'm straight?
I think it's implied!
In that episode, we see how upsetting it is for Will when a parent acts like they're ashamed of him. Another experience that straight viewers might never have thought about and had maybe even been guilty of themselves. Now, maybe they would avoid doing it in the future. And then there's a very bold episode where the characters are excited about an upcoming TV milestone.
Only the first ever primetime network kiss between two gay men.
This one's a little bit meta, because at this point, broadcast television was still very hesitant about showing same-sex kisses. Other shows had walked right up to the line, but often cut away to somebody else watching, or let the camera pan away, so you just have to imagine it.
And there's the kiss. I was wondering if they were going to do it, and they're doing it.
On this episode of Will and Grace, Will and Jack go to NBC headquarters to complain about the network censoring a gay kiss.
But you will never see two gay men kissing on network television. It's a gay network, for God's sake. The symbol is a peacock.
And then they find a way around the censors.
And I just want to know how long I'm going to have to wait until I can see two gay men kiss on network television. Not as long as you'd think.
Now, they are still kind of hedging it here, getting away with the same-sex kiss because it's between two characters who aren't romantically interested in each other. But still, I love that this episode is essentially making fun of their own network for its squeamishness. And Will and Grace wasn't afraid to tackle some darker themes, like how sometimes Will closets himself, avoiding Jack when his straight colleagues are around, and even referring to Jack like this.
I don't know, sometimes he's just such a...
The Jack character sometimes comes off as a bit frivolous. But to his credit, he calls Will out.
I'd rather be a than afraid.
It is shocking to hear this word said so many times on a 90s primetime sitcom. But I love this episode because it shows how Jack is more complex than he might seem. He knows that some people laugh at him, and it hurts. But pretending to be something he's not would be even worse. Now, these are topics that other shows could tackle, but none of them had a director like Jimmy Burrows, who'd been tackling queer topics longer than most other directors had been in the industry, and whose specialty was finding comedy in pain and bringing people together by laughing through that pain.
And there's no power like the power of laughter. So if you can make somebody laugh, you can make them like you.
Jimmy also had decades of experience dealing with networks and advertisers. He was uniquely experienced when it came to defending storylines like these. Without him, these episodes probably would have died a death of 1,000 cuts. And this wasn't without risk. The episode where they used the F-slur caused at least one advertiser to drop the show. And that's something that I experience on this channel. Whenever I use that word in a video, YouTube demonetizes it. Sometimes age gates it. Fortunately, in Will and Grace's case, the show was successful enough that other advertisers stepped in. Probably because at its height, there were over 20 million people watching every week. And big ratings are nice, but Will and Grace accomplished something more. They proved that advertisers would support shows with gay leads. And even if some of them got cold feet, others would step in. That opened the door to more shows like it. The next couple years saw a bunch of network shows with queer leads. Ugly Betty, Glee, Grey's Anatomy, Modern Family.
There would be no Modern Family without Will and Grace. They held the door open for us. And once we were in the room for a few years, we turned around and saw that they were still holding the door open. And we were like, have you been here the whole time? And they're like, no, we went out to get a coffee and a bite to eat, but we're back now.
And it had an impact beyond just television. In 2012, then Vice President Joe Biden was on a news show, and they asked if he supported marriage equality. This was the first year that polling showed a majority of Americans supported the freedom to marry, and no administration had endorsed it yet. Biden shocked everyone by saying, yes, he did. What's the big deal? And he explained why he thought attitudes were shifting so fast.
I think Will and Grace probably did more to educate the American public than almost anything anybody's ever done so far.
So is Joe right? Did a sitcom play a role in that change? Well, researchers at MIT specifically looked into it, and they found that over time, people who watched Will and Grace and shows like it became more supportive. Seeing fictional queer people on television made them more understanding toward queer people in real life. The more shows they watched, the bigger the impact. So the fact that Will and Grace was watched by millions of people meant that it had a big impact, and all the shows that followed could keep that impact going long after it ended. After Will and Grace, Jimmy didn't slow down. He directed dozens of shows through the 2000s. And his last project before he passed away in June of 2026 was Mid-Century Modern, a sitcom with entirely gay leads. When I first started this video, I struggled to figure out what made Jimmy's work so special. I watched hundreds of hours of television shows, read memoirs, articles, watched interviews, and after weeks of toil, I felt like maybe I'd got my head around it. It was just after that I watched this interview.
Are there elements of a story you always look for? Every script you read?
Oh, yeah.
What would you...
Humanity.
That's something he articulated on an episode of The Comeback, explaining what makes comedy connect.
Surprising only comes from a group of writers huddled in a corner, beating themselves up to beat out a better joke. It's the chubby guy who's a secret alcoholic. It's the gay guy who, despite all the work he's done, still hates himself a little. Yeah. They turn all that pain into a joke. And Val, those broken, beautiful souls are what makes something great.
As a director, Jimmy brought people together, on set and in the audience, by finding laughter in pain. He came to that work from an extremely fortunate position, and he used that position to bring other people up behind him, including people who might have otherwise been overlooked. Tim Bagley, who played Larry on Will and Grace, said he really wanted to get it right. He had a real understanding and empathy for LGBTQ people. He was definitely an ally who really walked the walk. It's rare for an entertainer to have such a big impact, beyond just his work, but on the way that people see each other.
I would drive my 13-year-old in carpool, and I would pick up 4 or 5 other 13, 14-year-olds. And they'd get in the car with me, and they'd talk to me, and they'd say, "What's on the show tonight? What's on Will and Grace?" And I say, "Oh, my God. They don't see it as a problem. This is amazing." So I have 4 14-year-olds here who won't be prejudicial when it comes to homosexuality, will be embracing and will be understanding and say, God, we're all alike deep down. So that's the amazing thing to me, this kind of deep-seated vulnerability that allows you to get away with a lot of stuff.
Now, there's lots more to say about Jimmy Burrows and his iconic sitcoms. Check out Patreon for bonus videos about the lost sitcoms that never made it to air, about the SNL appearance that saved Taxi and why they removed it from reruns and streaming, and why Frasier seems to be gay even when it's not trying to be gay. Huge thanks to Emma for the edit on this video. Check out her channel, Media Processing. And for lots more about the people who fought to get queer characters onto other classic sitcoms like Bewitched, The Golden Girls, The Simpsons, check out my book, Hi Honey, I'm Homo. You can get a signed copy at gaysitcoms.com. And now, if you'll excuse me, I don't want to miss the birth of my son.
A new